I want to remind you that at the end of today's sermon, we will participate in communion together. So get your home communion packets ready, or if you're improvising with something else, that would be great. And then again at the end, we'll participate together. David Rothenberg died in July of 2018. In fact, he died the day before my mother did. David Rothenberg died at the age of 42. He was known for a horrible accident which occurred to him at the age of 6. His father, Charles Rothenberg, was in a custody dispute with David's mother, Marie. But on March the 3rd, 1983, at a motel near Disneyland in Anaheim, California, Charles gave his son a sleeping pill and after he fell asleep, poured kerosene on the bed and set fire to it. He left the room and watched from a telephone booth across the street while other guests rescued his son, David. David suffered third-degree burns over 90% of his body. He required finger and toe amputations and received more than 100 skin grafts. He was badly disfigured, and during one grafting operation experienced brain swelling that led to seizures and other complications. David's mother wrote a book about the ordeal. It is simply entitled David. And while the primary focus of the book is about David and the multiple surgeries he had and how he endured so much pain, there is an underlying storyline as well. It is about a couple named Ken and Judy Curtis who connected with Marie and helped her during this horrific time in her life. Ken and Judy Curtis were members of the Eastside Christian Church in Anaheim, and they had Marie move into their home while David was in the hospital for those many months. Ken had suffered a burn accident while putting sealant on a bowling alley floor, and he was familiar with the processes that would be used to help David overcome his accident. Ken and Judy were willing to use their experience during a horrible time in their lives to help minister to someone who was going through the same. That had to be difficult, but they placed someone else above themselves and gave of themselves very generously. They provided David's mother a place to stay, a car to drive since she lived away from Anaheim. They bought her clothes. They helped to organize fundraisers to help pay the mounting medical and legal bills. Marie's parents thought that some cult had sucked her in, but she learned over those several months about the love of Jesus Christ being expressed in some very tangible ways. And during her time with the Curtis family, Marie saw them attending church, praying together, hosting Bible studies in their home, and herself being a recipient of their generosity and love. Several months after her son's injury, Marie was baptized into Christ. I think the book David is out of print now, but you can probably find some used copies online, and I would highly recommend it. But Ken and Judy Curtis showed up and served in tangible ways a mother and her son who were going through an excruciating crisis, and they provided some comfort and encouragement. As we continue to deal with this coronavirus pandemic, I want us to see how we can think of others over ourselves. I think for most of us, we look at ourselves, and each one of us considers ourselves pretty important. I kind of like me. I consider myself important, but I'm not the only person who's going through this pandemic. So we can help provide some comfort and encouragement to others who need it, and it helps to keep one's mind off oneself. So I want us to see today how Jesus thought of others during his crisis moment. We're going to back up just a little bit and go to 4 days in front of Easter. It was 4 days based on how the Jews counted days in that time. It was the Thursday evening prior to Jesus' resurrection. It was the night before his crucifixion. This is the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. It is the night of the Passover feast, and Jesus and his disciples are gathered in an upper room. It was the job of the lowest servant in the house to wash the feet of the guests so the host's throw rugs would not be soiled. The disciples are too busy arguing among one another about their individual importance. At the very least, one of them should have volunteered to have washed Jesus' feet. And while the arguing over who was the greatest continued, Jesus got up and he starts washing their feet. How humiliating I think it was for the 12, knowing that Jesus was doing for them what they should have offered to do for him. When I was in Israel in November 2017, I bought several olive wood carvings. And one of those olive wood carvings is really my favorite one. It's the one of Jesus washing Peter's feet. I gave it away to a really good friend as a gift. And I hope to return to Israel in the fall of 2022, and maybe I'll get to purchase another one then. But let's see this morning the example Jesus set about serving others, and then notice some opportunities where we can serve others. One of the most intense evenings of Jesus' ministry involved feet. Now that seems a little bit unusual until you think of the cultural and the geographical areas where Jesus walked. It was rocky, it was dusty. When I was in Israel, one of the things I noticed is the lack of grass like that we have here. There is none in Israel. But there are rocks by the quadrillions. In Jesus' day, people either went barefoot or they wore sandals. And since we're talking about feet, we're going to take a walk through this passage in John chapter 13. So turn your Bibles to John chapter 13. We're going to begin with verse 1 and working our way down to the end of verse 17. We're going to see the example that Jesus displayed for his disciples of how to serve others over self. Notice in verses 1 and 2 the prideful inattention that occurred on that night. John 13, verse 1, it was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. Now, that evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. The food had been cooked, the table had been set, and I'm sure the disciples thought that the matter of washing feet had been taken care of, but it wasn't. And as Jesus and the disciples enter the room, they saw the towel and the basin in the corner. That would be a normal household item of that day, much like our having a rug at our front doors for people to clean their shoes. So it was customary before dinner that everyone's feet were washed. Now, the tables of that day were very low, and you didn't sit in a chair. You sat on pillows or on the floor, and you reclined, meaning that you sat with your body somewhat stretched out, and your feet are either going to be near the table and the food, or they're at least going to be near a person next to you. I'm guessing that each of the disciples were probably starting to feel a bit uncomfortable, maybe thinking, hey, somebody ought to at least wash Jesus' feet. If I wait long enough, somebody else will do that. Luke 22, verse 24 gives us another little commentary on this. It says, a dispute rose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. Can you hear the disciples arguing about this overlooked but this very necessary and common item? I did it the last time. It's Matthew's turn. He hasn't done it in a long time. Peter and John were to address all the details. They should do it. John, who was sitting right next to Jesus, may have said, oh, I'm over here near Jesus. I'm in spiritual thought. Jesus wouldn't want me to leave his side. Peter is probably thinking, don't these turkeys know that the call of God is on my life? I'm the one who answered Jesus' question, who do you say that I am? And I had the answer. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. If these other guys knew who I was going to become, they'd be over here washing my feet. And the disciples allowed their pride to get in the way of serving. Now, we don't know all the details, but we do know that none of the disciples rose to the occasion. They all sat there waiting for someone else to address the need. But then notice the genuine motivation of Jesus in this scenario. Now remember, he is going to the cross in just a few hours. He knows that his time has come to be brutally tortured. Verse 2 says, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and he wrapped a towel around his waist. The story begins with the phrase, having loved his own. And even though the disciples failed him here and in other times before, Jesus still loved them. Genuine motivation occurs because there's humility in the person who's willing to serve others. Despite all the pressures around him, Jesus wasn't thinking primarily of himself. Someone said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is not thinking of yourself at all. And this would be one final lesson that Jesus could show his disciples before going to the cross. My mother died in mid-July 2 years ago. She was hospitalized and in a rehab center several times over a 5-week period prior to her death. The week of July 4th, she was in the hospital and there were signs of dementia starting to appear, and she was experiencing congestive heart failure. Her cardiologist called me and told me she was failing to thrive and that most likely she would die within the next couple of weeks. Now, being the only child, I knew I would have to travel to northeastern Kentucky where she lived and address some of the things with her house and her belongings. I'd already been down there numerous times during the weeks prior. But the Sunday before July the 4th, and July the 4th that year was on a Wednesday, a friend of mine emailed and said, "I know this is a tough time for you. Is there anything at all I can do?" And I just fired back a quick response. "I'm traveling to Kentucky for the day on Wednesday on July 4th because I need to begin addressing my mother's house and cleaning it out. I'm going down by myself because Barb is going to Cincinnati to see our son Adam there, to see him, because we'd been dealing with my mother for so many weeks. We really hadn't had an opportunity to visit with Adam hardly at all during that time." And I sent that out and said, "That's the biggest thing that I've got to deal with coming up." And minutes later, he called and he said, "I'll go with you and I'll do what's needed." When we got down to Kentucky that Wednesday on the 4th of July, it was very hot. It was nearly 100 degrees outside, and he stood outside from about 10 in the morning to about 6 in the evening, power washing my mother's driveway, sidewalks, and porch. He gave up his holiday and his time with his family to go and help out another person. After we got done doing some of that cleaning at the house, we cleaned up, went to the hospital to see my mother, and then we went to dinner. And even then, the individual kept serving and kept giving. I had a gift card for Outback Steakhouse, which was fairly close to the hospital where my mother was. And we pulled into Outback, and he said, "No," he said, "You're not paying. I'll take care of the meal." Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is not thinking of yourself at all. Then we see in this passage a humble demonstration, verse 5. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. This was inconvenient for Jesus. Most of us don't like getting interrupted when we're in the middle of a meal, but Jesus interrupted his meal to do a menial task that somebody else should have done. If you serve and think of others, it might be inconvenient to your schedule. I mentioned the friend who went with me to Kentucky. 2 weeks later, at my mother's funeral, I was surprised when 28 people from Tri-Village made the 3-hour trip down to Kentucky to attend her funeral. And I know that several of them had to take time off from work, some of them paid, some of them unpaid. And it was a very humble demonstration to me of their caring. And this was also undignified for Jesus. He took off his outer garment so it would not get soaked as he reached his hands into the basin. He bared his chest and his legs. He knelt on the hard floor. He began to wash 24 dirty feet. That's not very dignified for the most powerful man who ever walked the earth and for the very person who created the earth. Serving sometimes is a person of position, removing himself from one role and becoming a servant in another. I think most of us were impressed when a few years ago, former Presidents Clinton and Senior Bush went around the world raising funds together and working together. They were former presidents, they were of opposite political parties, but they saw the needs of those hurting and suffering as more important than their positions and their differences. Moms and dads, especially with elementary age children at home, try this today. Ask your kids to wash your feet today before lunch and just see how they react. This was very undignified for Jesus. This was also unsanitary. Jesus was about to eat, and now he had to touch dirty, smelly feet. Some of them had rashes and corns and warts and fungus, and he washed and he dried them while the disciples sat there dumbfounded. He had no gloves on his hands. He touched their feet. Not very sanitary. And this was unfair. John takes some liberty and gives us a little commentary. Remember, he'd be writing this story after the fact. And in verse 2, he says, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Judas was already there, even though he'd already decided to sell Jesus out. Jesus would have already known what Judas had done, yet Jesus washed the feet of his betrayer. Can you serve someone who's hurt you? That would be very humbling. People don't see much of that in Washington, D.C. today, but they should see it in followers of Jesus Christ. I would love to see an artist's rendition of Jesus stooping low to wash the feet of the man he knew already betrayed him. Preacher and author Chuck Swindoll said if he had been with Jesus, he would have filled a tub with boiling water for Judas and said, stick your feet in there, Bubba. That'll clean you up. You need to get accustomed to the heat anyway. Jesus didn't just serve those who appreciated him or agreed with him. He knelt low and he served the one who was about to sell him out. Can you walk next door to the neighbor with whom you've had the boundary dispute and take food when one of them lost a parent? Can you walk into the office of the person who got the promotion instead of you and express your concern about maybe a wayward child? Well, during this very intimate moment, while the disciples are sitting there dumbfounded and the creator of the universe is washing their feet, there occurs a self-righteous objection. Begins in verse 6. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you'll understand. No, said Peter, you'll never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then Lord Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Peter pops up and he ruins this hallmark moment. When it was his turn to have his feet washed, he strongly objected. Lord, are you going to wash my feet? It's interesting, in the original Greek language in which the New Testament was written, the two pronouns are side by side, and Peter looks at Jesus and goes, you? Mine? At first glance, it appears Peter's being very humble. You'll never wash my feet, Lord. But really, it was his pride coming out. He was refusing any assistance. I can handle the problems myself. I don't need a counselor. I won't ask for financial assistance right now. Let me stop here for just a moment. If you're watching and you have a need right now during this pandemic, maybe your income has stopped, maybe you've been furloughed, maybe there's just a bill that's not getting paid, don't allow your pride to stop you from seeking assistance. I have a list of 22 families who've indicated that they are willing to help other people in our church right now. And if you have a need, and depending on the specifics of it, it's very possible we can get you some assistance. Just email me at paulsnoddy@trivillage.org. When this pandemic started, a member emailed me, Paul, a couple of years ago, the church helped me with a significant bill and an issue at my house. I'm now in a very different situation, and I can help others. I'm sending a check and paying the church back, and ask that the funds would be used for someone who needs them. Or when you serve others, someone may object. The elderly neighbor next to you that you keep checking on continually tells you they don't need anything, but maybe you figure out a need they have and you can provide it. Verse 10, Jesus answered, those who've had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. See, the act Jesus was performing had both a physical and a spiritual purpose. He wasn't just washing their feet, he was teaching the disciples about serving and how much he loved them. And in the very next verse, John explains what Jesus meant when he said, and you're clean, though not every one of you. He says, for he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. Next time you start struggling with ego, look down at your feet. I suspect as Jesus was hanging on the cross the next day, the disciples who even dared to go near there probably looked down at their feet, because the very last act they had seen Jesus do was to wash their feet. Oh, at the end of this object lesson, Jesus gave some challenging instructions. Verse 12. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. Notice that Jesus didn't finish and say, now, will one of you please come and wash my feet? That's not what he said. He asked that they wash one another's feet, and he said, I've set you the example. Serving the Lord can be a delight, but serving others can be a drudgery. In 2002, I had opportunity to travel to Honduras with Lifeline Christian Mission, and it was a great mission trip to another country and to see how people lived, and most of Honduras is very poor. And there was a hill where we walked, a very steep hill, where there were 29,000 shacks, three-walled shacks, where people lived. Most of these shacks were housing anywhere from maybe 4 people in a family to as many as 12 people in a family. And as the 12 of us that went on that trip walked up that hill, the raw sewage from those shacks was flowing down the deeply rutted main street. Now, those of us that were with the Lifeline staff that were leading us up through there, we're trying to step over the raw sewage. We're trying to avoid it. A lot of the staff, they just trudged right on through all the filth because the compassion in their hearts was so great for the people that they didn't pay much attention to the circumstances. They knew why they were there. They were there to serve unconditionally. Verse 15. I've set you an example that you should do as I've done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. So I want us to look at some opportunities where we can serve others. Because in the most intense moment of his life, Jesus is focused on others. That's because he was secure in his identity, and so he served. Serving others is never about one's status. It's really about one's relationship with the Lord and how humbly you can serve, even when our nation's going through this pandemic. So I want to close by sharing a couple of ways you can serve. Here's the first way. Serve by taking the initiative. Serve by taking the initiative. While it certainly was not Jesus' place to wash feet, he saw it needed done, and he did it. Maybe you have an elderly neighbor whose lawn needs mowed. You could do that. Don't ask. Just go do it. Maybe your sister in the next town over needs some supplies. Go to the store, purchase those for her, and go deliver them. Did you see where a doctor's wife tried to find her husband a place where he could stay when he was not with the COVID-19 patients he was treating? She formed the group RVs for MDs. And now 25,000 people have joined this group to help connect RV owners and healthcare workers needing places to stay. Now, not every act of service needs to be that drastic or that flashy. Honestly, most serving is done one person serving one other person at a time. At least 2 families that I'm aware of in our church started making face masks and delivering to those who might be more susceptible to contracting the virus. And earlier today, I had someone email me and said, do you know where I can get some masks? And I texted this lady in our church, and she said they'll have them by Saturday. She goes, but right now I'm making 50 more for some people in the Air Force. Another family in our church this past weekend took plastic Easter eggs to a couple of other families in the church. Those families had young kids, and they got to have an Easter egg hunt. So don't wait on somebody else to come up with the idea. You start one. Or you just participate. You write a note to an essential worker, and you can deliver it here at the church in the bin outside the main doors. And if you aren't getting out, you can mail your notes to the church, or you can email me, and we'll arrange for somebody to pick those up for you. In the first week we did this, just over a week ago, we had around 250 notes that were written. Many of those were drawings by young children. So take some time today and sit down and write a note to essential workers. Have your kids draw something for them. Trust me, it'll cheer them up greatly. Let's shoot for maybe 500 notes this coming week. I know we have school teachers from our church who've initiated online games and classroom forums, and they've organized parades through neighborhoods to see children. So you serve by taking the initiative. And then you serve by being practical. See, this isn't rocket science. You just do something for someone that would be helpful. And you bless someone, and you get blessed as a result. So I want to encourage you to do something today. Parents, get your children involved too. Younger kids can caller notes, as I mentioned, for essential workers. Being an overcomer, the title of this series, Being an Overcomer, means we learn to see others over ourselves, and it's very easy during this time to focus only on self and to get the mental attitude to say, I deserve. Maybe you could deliver food to a neighbor, and without asking, just take it to them. Maybe you have some supplies in abundance, paper towels, toilet paper, hand disinfectant. You can give some of that to people who need it. Maybe you could pay for the person behind you at the drive-thru later today. Did you see the story this past Monday from Upper Arlington about the man who went to a bakery and he ordered one donut and he paid $1,000 for it? Emily Smith, the manager at the Tremont Goodie Shop, said the kind-hearted man wanted to make a major donation to help the business during the coronavirus pandemic. And Smith said that on top of the donation, Monday was the day her payroll was due, so the gift allowed her to pay employees with less stress. If you're going to pick up lunch or dinner today for your family, why not consider going to a locally owned place? And if you've got the ability, you leave an extravagant tip for the servers. If you're getting a pizza tonight and it's going to be $30 for the food for your family, pay with a $50 bill, leave a $20 tip. And by the way, Tri-Village members and attendees, you have been so generous during this pandemic when we have been unable to have church services here in the church building all together. And we've been doing these online services. You've been so generous with your offerings during this time. About 50% of our church budget is staffing and related expenses. And due to your generosity, you've enabled 12 staff members to keep receiving their salaries. That is helping other people. That 50% of our church budget aligned with staffing is also in alignment with churches our size across the nation. And during the month of March, you gave offerings that were very generous and allowed us to enter into the month of April with about a $17,000 surplus. I already mentioned that I have a list on my desk of 22 families in our church who've offered to help other people. One of our members told me that his company has been employed by the state of Ohio to help with their websites and that his workload has more than doubled. But as a result of that, his company has given him a significant bonus each week while this is occurring. And he indicated to me via email that he wanted to be generous because people had been generous to him. And so he's one of the people on that list that said, I can help someone where there's a need. I read an article just a couple of days ago about how you could serve others during this pandemic, and it ended with these little phrases: wash your hands, wash feet, rinse, and repeat. But nothing matches the generosity of Jesus. The one who deserved to have his feet washed was washing the feet of other people. But that Thursday at the Passover feast was only the beginning of Jesus' love being shown, because it continued next day on the cross. I opened with the story of David Rothenberg, but also the generosity of Ken and Judy Curtis. Listen to this story of generosity about Jesus. It's written by the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 2, beginning at verse 5. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. As we prepare to observe the Lord's Supper, we remember that Jesus not only served, but he sacrificed his life so we could have the hope of eternity with him. And whether you have communion packets from the church, or you're improvising with your own items, or even if you are just mentally participating, let's take these few moments and remember how Jesus thought of others over himself, and he stayed on the cross. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, we thank you that in these few moments we've had to spend together, that we could look at your word and see the example of Jesus and what he was willing to do with his own disciples the very night before his own death. Instead of being focused on self, he focused on others. And during this pandemic, it's easy to focus on ourselves because, honestly, we're getting tired and we're getting weary. Sometimes we're getting frustrated. And we wonder what's in it for us and how can I overcome my own difficulties and my own frustrations. And yet one of the best ways we're taught over and over again in your word is to do it by serving other people. So God, give us a bit of a new heart today. And thank you for the reminder of Jesus as he gave up his own life on the cross, not only to serve us, but to sacrifice for us and to allow us the opportunity to be reminded of the love that you as our Heavenly Father was willing to give to us. For it's through the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. You can take the bread. And we'll take the bread together. You can take the juice, and let's drink together. Here in just a moment, you're going to hear David Brown and see David sing the song, The Basin and the Towel. But would you remember today, as you get ready to go about through your day, find an opportunity where you could serve someone else. Take the initiative, do it on your own, and do something that would be practical and beneficial and helpful and encouraging. Wash your hands, wash feet, rinse, and repeat.